Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Obsidian Anubis, and I'm back with another 9th Age Battle Report. This is Game 3 of the OFCC that we had this past month at the end of August here out in the Pacific Northwest. Highly recommend it. It was a fantastic tournament. Unfortunately, not a lot of turnout for the 9th Age, but I think that might have been just more because of when the tournament was versus actual attitude out here. Yeah, I think there's still a lot of opportunity, and I would really encourage anybody who's in the Pacific Northwest to reach out to me or to any of the other gamers either in Bellingham or in Portland and get some games in. I mean, we are definitely available and we are ready to play. So I just came off a minor victory against Sarine Ancients for Game 2. So I kind of felt good. Lost the first game and then had a minor victory, so I thought it was doing pretty good. So this is the third game, so the last game on Saturday. So I'm taking my 13th Border Army, and I'm going against Warriors of the Dark Gods. Alright, so for my opponent, on the far left, there's a Warrior Chariot, and then 2 units of Chosen of Wrath, and then the Exalted Herald behind that. There's a big block of Warriors, and with them is a Sorcerer, who is an Adept of Evocation, has Plate Armor, the Alchemist Alloy, Talisman of the Void, and Magical Heirlooms. The Warriors are favored champions of Greed and have the banner of the Relentless Company. My opponent also has some dogs, which you can actually see very close to the front of this picture. This picture was actually taken after turn 1, so my opponent has already moved up a little bit. And so you can see the dogs at the very base right-hand side. You can kind of see the end of the tail end of them. So again, for my list, I have the 13th Auxiliary, which is just 20 heavy infantry with Musician and Standard. Next to them, so they've been marked. So this is the secondary scenario where you mark 3 scoring units. So they've been marked. Next to them are my Imperial Guard, the Guardians of Uller. They have full command, and with them is my General, who is a Prelate. He has a 1-up armor save and has a great weapon, and has the Imperial Seal. To the right of them are the 13th Auxiliary. They have just 15 crossbowmen, and they have a banner with the Marksman pennant. Behind them is you can just see the 2 horses of my Arcane Altar that has my Wizard of Divination on it. And then to the right of that is the 13th cohort itself, of course part of the 13th Army. With them is my BSB. He has the Winter Cloak, and I think that's it. He doesn't have a whole lot of magic stuff. And then over here on the right, I have my 10 militia with bows. Behind them is 1 block of 23 flagellants. And then to the right of the small impassable building, I have my 5 knights with great weapons and Musician, and they've also been one of the units which are marked. I have my 2nd unit of flagellants, so 23 flagellants with a champion, and with them is my 4th character. He's a Prelate with the armor, the black plate steel. Behind him, at the very bottom of this picture, you can just see the corner of the template, or my 5 readers. If we look back at my opponent, you see another group of like 6 Chosen of Wrath in the water, another Warrior Chariot, 5 Barbarian Horsemen, who are one of the units I've marked. I also marked the large block of Warriors and one of the Chosen of Wrath. And then on the far right, my opponent has 3 Feldrakes. Alright, so like I said, this picture was actually taken after turn 1 for my opponent. You can see he moved up those dogs right in front of my face. He didn't bother charging, just moved up right in front of my face of my skirmishers. I must apologize, I don't have a lot of pictures. We were kind of running kind of quick and I kind of zoned out for a while. So there's only going to be a few pictures, so I will try to do my best to explain what happens. So if we jump to, in the future, a couple more turns. So you can see over here on the left, my opponent tried to charge the chariot into my small block of heavy infantry, my support unit. They fled, so which is why they're facing the wrong direction at the moment. So my opponent failed that charge. The other 2 units, I think, just moved up fairly aggressively. You can see I've done a couple wounds with my shooting. My opponent has also blasted my crossbowmen a little bit with magic. You can see I got a number of spells off. You can see I got scrying off on my auxiliary heavy support unit, and the stars line off on my Imperial Guard. You can see the dogs fled, so I managed to shoot I think 3 of them off, and they fled, but they rallied again on my opponent's next turn, which is what's being shown here. You can see my opponent tried to charge the chariot into my knights. I didn't want him to make that, so I went ahead and fled, and so he failed that charge as well. I was hoping I could maybe countercharge with my flagellants, and that will be a big mistake leading later on. Alright, so we're going to jump, I think, 2 more turns. So you can see my Imperial Guard have engaged with one of the unit I've chosen. I've killed 3 of them, but they've killed quite a few of me. I've managed to put a couple more wounds on the other unit I've chosen, and I've moved up my Halberdiers to protect the flank of my greatswords. You can see that my opponent's dogs have now been wiped out, so between shooting and magic I've managed to kill them off and they've fled. I think there was 1 left, but it eventually fled off the board. You can see that my militia has moved up just to clear the way for my flagellants. And then over here, we're going to jump in a few more, jump to my opponent's next turn. You can see I got countercharged with my Imperial Guard with the other unit I've chosen. The warriors charged my halberdiers. On the far right of this, you can see my opponent's chariot moved up. So at the moment, my flagellants declared a charge on the chariot, and unfortunately I failed that charge, and then he countercharged into the flank with his Feldrakes, and that was basically the biggest mistake of this game, is he charged into the flank of my flagellants, and while I am unbreakable, I would automatically fail every leadership test to attempt to reform, so I could never reform. So at most I had 3 flagellants attacking, and his Feldrakes just basically ate that unit in like 3 turns. So it was a complete waste of flagellants, and it was kudos to my opponent for taking that advantage, but it was definitely a huge mistake for my part. So on my turn, we jump forward again. You can see my Imperial Guard are gone. So I managed to wipe out one of those 2 units of chosen. The one that I did wipe out was the one that I had targeted. The one which is seen here in the crater, they eventually wiped out and I think caught my general who was fleeing after his unit was wiped out and wiped him out. You can see I chaffed up the other unit of chosen with my flagellants, and I would say with my militia, and moved my flagellants to countercharge. In the top left of this picture, you can see the base of my opponent's barbarian horsemen. That was the 3rd unit which I had marked, and my opponent wisely just kept them in the back. There was no need for them. You can also see my opponent's general sitting back there, just the Exalted Herald. He flew around and he cast a few spells, but in all honesty, my opponent didn't even need him for this battle, because of how poor of a showing I did. He basically just sat in the back the entire time. He had a leadership bubble and he did a few spells, but in all reality, my opponent could have easily come to the same result this battle came to without having him here. Speaking of results, this is actually the last picture I have of the game. Like I said, it was a very quick picture, tournament, or battle. You can see in the bottom left that the chariot did finally make combat with my support unit. I don't remember if they eventually broke, or if they managed to stay around long enough to at least keep some of the points on the board. As it went, I lost most of my army. I did eventually manage to wipe out the warriors, so I got 2 of my opponent's 3 scoring units. Unfortunately, my opponent got all 3 of mine, so I did lose the secondary objective as well as most of my army. The 1 unit of flagellants that was at the far right with the 1 character, they will eventually be eaten completely by the Feldrakes, except for the character who broke from combat. My opponent did not manage to catch them. On my turn 6, rallied. On my opponent's turn 6, he charged in, and my prelate managed to actually do 3 wounds and kill one of the 3 Feldrakes by himself and take no wounds in return. So he actually managed to kill Feldrake and hold. So he was definitely the man of the match, even though he really did nothing this entire game. He just, at the very end, managed to not get wiped out. I think my other unit of flagellants did eventually get wiped out, the one which is actually seen in this picture, and my chariot did also get destroyed. It was charged by one of my opponent's chariots. The one which is on the right side, I believe it came around and charged and wiped out my chariot. So overall, it was a pretty decisive defeat for the Empire. With points and the secondary objectives, it ended up being a 119. I did manage to kill 1 or 2 units of the Chosen. I did manage to kill all the warriors plus his sorcerer. So I took a fair points off the board, but I had almost nothing left. I had my 1 prelate who did nothing other than not get run down by Feldrakes, and I might have had my crossbowmen and maybe my other unit of support unit. But overall, it was a pretty bad showing for the Imperial Army, so it ended up being a Chaos major victory. It was okay though. It was another bloodbath, which was fantastic. I brought a very close combat list, and it was a very close combat battle. My opponent had no shooting. He had magic, but no shooting at all. So we basically just rushed each other and threw our troops at one another. And I think it's fairly easy to determine that Warriors of Chaos easily outbeats a Empire of Sonstal human in close combat. So it's probably not the best idea to charge headlong into my opponent, but that's the army I brought, and that's kind of the player I am. So I really enjoyed it, even though I got crushed. Kudos to my opponent. He did a great job, and I really enjoyed playing him. Yeah, so we have one more tournament to go. Sorry, one more battle to go for this tournament. And so maybe I can redeem myself for that one. We'll see. If you guys have any questions or comments, please put those in the comment section below. And then I will talk to you guys later. And as always, game on.